employees without good financial records. In this session, we shall take our first look at how records are kept as double entries. You will discover that we often start by representing the accounts as T accounts. These entries will be totaled from time to time and the information used to construct the trial balance. The trial balance then forms the basis for the construction of the financial reports. The first entries that resemble our present-day pattern of recording in accounting were made in the books of medieval bankers. Actually, many of these bankers were little more than successful traders who had become moneylenders. They fixed their rates of interest according to their own assessments of those seeking to borrow. What they had in common was their pattern of recording that recognized the dual nature of transactions. Consider the type of transaction that these early bankers were familiar with. Romeo, a banker in Venice, lends Francesca $1,000. Romeo now reviews his position. His asset of cash has decreased by $1,000. However, he also has an asset that represents how much he is owed, and this has increased by $1,000. There has been a transfer of assets. We can now carry out the same review for Francesca. Her asset of cash has increased by $1,000, but she also has a liability that has increased by $1,000. For both Romeo and Francesca, we can see that the transaction has two effects. An entry is required in accounting to show each effect. This is where the idea of double entry accounting originated. The system used by these bankers also introduced two more familiar terms to accounting. A person who owed the banker money was referred to as a debtor. Bankers would record the money owed by each debtor in their accounting journals. The term is derived from the Latin debere, meaning to owe. Francesca has become a debtor for Romeo. Francesca now owes Romeo money. She has been entrusted with the sum of $1,000 which is to be repaid to Romeo. The Latin for being entrusted is creditus, so she lists Romeo as a creditor. Romeo has entrusted her with $1,000. Romeo and Francesca will each make two entries to their accounts. To do so, they make use of the terms debit and credit. Francesca can record the two effects by recording the $1,000 she receives as a cash asset and recording the $1,000 she owes Romeo as a liability to a creditor. Romeo records the $1,000 that his cash account has been reduced by and the $1,000 that he is owed by Francesca as his debtor. The terms debit and credit are derived from the idea of debtors and creditors. We can illustrate how this works with a simple transaction that represents the start of most businesses. How can we record the initial investment of capital? Think first about the two effects on the business. What has the business gained? What does the business owe? The transaction could be recorded by showing its effect on the accounting equation. The basis of that equation is that assets less liabilities are equal to equity. However, it would be difficult to record large numbers of transactions in this way. Instead, the accounting equation is represented through a number of different accounts. The business has gained $5,000 as a cash asset, which is recorded as a debit in an account called cash. The business records the interest of Romeo as a credit in an equity account called capital. You should note that by recording the transaction in this way, we also recognize the business as a separate entity from Romeo's personal finances. To set out the accounts, there are separate columns for debits and credits. By tradition, the debits are recorded in the left column and the credits in the right column. At first, you may find it easier to visualize these accounts in the shape of a letter T. Thus, the cash account gets a debit entry on the left to record the increase in cash. The equity account gets a credit on the right to record the increase in equity. In the next session, we shall look at how we determine whether entries are debits or credits. This ends our first session on double entry accounting. Thank you for listening and for watching.